everyone, it's Lorelei and welcome back to episode 1 part 11. The last time we left off, there was a murder. But before we start, thanks to you guys, I now know that the character menu got updated after the murder and I went to check it out and it was quite shocking to say the least. I hope you guys don't mind me discussing a bit before we dive in today. Right, so these are all the people who got murdered, right? And we start with Kraus. We start where it all begins. There's probably a reason why all of their faces are smashed, right? But that I still don't know. But it's more peculiar where it says, we start where it all begins. I'm guessing this has to do with him being the eldest son and therefore the next head of the family. That's why it says we start where it all begins. But then it's a bit curious why Eva was skipped and we go straight to Rudolph and Kyrie. Rudolph's one says that he has the right to lament his ill fortune. And I wonder if this has something to do with how he mentioned that he would be murdered. Like, I still don't know how he knew that he would. But for Kyrie, it seems like she was just unlucky because she was just chosen by the demon's roulette. That's all there is to it. Meaning that there's no special meaning behind why Kyrie was chosen as a sacrifice. Maybe it's because she was with Rudolph and conveniently just became one of the 6. I don't know. Rosa's one was the most surprising because we see like a direct reference to the self. I'll be seeing her again, so I'm not lonely. And my first thought was, well, who is it? It could be the 19th person, but immediately my mind went to Maria because I don't know, it's like out of all the people in this family, Maria's the only one who would feel this way towards Rosa. But I mean, I think the other children also seems to care for like their aunts and uncles, so it doesn't have to be exclusive to Maria. But it's so Maria-like. Then for Shannon, it's don't worry, everyone will be revived in the Golden Land, which definitely is a reference to the epitaph. I don't really have much to say for Shannon's one because I'm still confused myself. For Goda, though, it seemed like he was just plain unlucky. Well, from what it seems, it's more like Kraus, Rosa, and Shannon are the 3 with more direct ties to the real reason why they were sacrificed, and Rudolph, Kyrie, and Goda were just unlucky. Seemingly so, anyway. But that's really all I have to say about this right now. And I think today's episode will give us a bit more insight into who could have done it. But let's just get right into it. All that could be heard was the sound of the rain, the voices from the kids' television program that Maria was watching, and the engrossed Maria's cackling voice. In other words, what greeted them as they returned dumbfounded from that horrible, bizarre scene was the voice of Maria as she rolled around laughing at the television. Not knowing how to explain to Maria that her mother, Rosa, was dead, those who returned to the room couldn't manage any more than a suffocating silence. At first, Maria returned their stares with a dubious look. But when she realized that they weren't trying to blame her for anything, she ignored them and again immersed herself in the television program. The children wordlessly sat down on the sofa. Their minds were probably blank from their state of shock. Though they had all cried and mourned so much, now they just vaguely sat there, their faces expressionless. Only Cannon had returned to his usual calm expression. However, that probably didn't mean he had been able to wipe out the shock. Nothing was reflected in his eyes as he stared into the emptiness. Hideyoshi, fidgeting as he remembered that horrible scene, kept muttering. Unbelievable. This can't be something of this world. It's the work of the devil. Every once in a while, he turned these into questions and bounced them off Nanjo. But Nanjo, in a calm, doctorally manner, kept repeating that nothing could be understood by only glancing at the scene. And that until the police arrived, he wouldn't know anything. However, Nanjo only appeared calm by comparison to Hideyoshi, who could not contain his agitation and fear. In fact, Nanjo had also received a huge shock, and his face was deathly pale. Maybe it was because of their attitudes that Natsuhi tried to rise to the challenge and take control. Natsuhi was apparently unchanged from her normal attitude, and she briskly gave directions.
私はお父様のところへ行ってきます。現時は急ぎ警察へ連絡を。
かしこまりました。
私も一緒させていただいていいかしら、夏日姉さん。クラウス兄さんがいなくなった以上、お父様の補佐は私の仕事だもの。その私が夏日姉さんに任せっきりで、ここでくつろいでいるわけにはいかないわ。
Natsuhi was struck speechless by Eva's aggressive actions in a situation like this. It seemed that she was claiming that, with Krau's dead, the one to take responsibility should not be his wife, but herself, the next highly ranked in the family. Possibly, she was not happy that Natsuhi was ignoring her and handling matters herself in this extreme situation. Of course, even Eva's mind had been blank from the shock until just now. She only returned to herself after Natsuhi started giving orders.
お好きになさるといいでしょう。
Natsuhi walked out without saying anything more. Eva followed behind her. Mere moments after they left, Kumasawa ran into the parlor. Since she wasn't a kind of person to run around, it would be normal to sense that something had happened. But since everyone had been stricken by that earlier shock, none of them took any notice of this trivial difference.
奥様夏日姉さんならお父さんのところへ行ったで。すぐ戻ってくるやろ。どないしたんや、熊沢さん。それが
Oh my god!
食堂に血が
Everyone in the parlor turned to listen. Everyone thought the same thing. I hope I misheard that. Just like how any container has a limit to how much you can put in it, no one felt like they could accept any more tragedies beyond what had already happened. So they all thought it. I hope I misheard that.
なんやて？食堂？朝食の準備に食堂に配膳に行ったら。
My goodness. The first to start running was George. His harsh footsteps jogged Hideyoshi and Nanjo to their senses, and they chased after him. Battler and the others followed. They flew into the dining hall one after another, but they didn't find any change that would have caused Kumasawa to go pale. To those who had viewed the gruesome scene in the storehouse, it was a bit of an anti-climax. However, Kumasawa, who had followed them, pointed it out. There really were some traces of blood on the floor. Compared to that terrible scene, it was not very dramatic. However, if you calmly thought about it, this definitely indicated the loss of a lot of blood.
ここにも血だまりがあるよ。これは一体。
だいぶ時間が経っているように見えますな。おそらく昨べここで殺されたんだと見ていいでしょう。
Last night?
そういうことになるんやろな。わしらは昨べずっと食堂で話し合いをしとった。そしてここに何者かが押し入ったに違いない。
父さんたちが打ち合わせを抜けて休んだのは 何時だっけ？
昨夜の24時を少し過ぎたくらいの頃や。だからその後にと考えるんが妥当やろな。
マジかよ。勘弁してくれよ。お嬢様、しっかり。
俺はもうさっきの倉庫でこの世の地獄ってやつを拝んじまったから。
そうかよ。よかったな。私は頭がどうにかなっちまいそうだぜ。ここは食堂だぜ。私は毎日ここで食事をして、学校のことをぼやいたり、宿題のことをぼやいたり、親父に学校の成績の話をされたり、そういうところなんだぜ。お嬢様、これ以上ここにいるのはよくありません。100万へ戻りましょう。
俺も同感さ。秀吉おじさん、この部屋は多分警察にとって重要な意味があると思います。俺たちが踏み荒らしちまうのはまずいんじゃないですか。
Battler proposed this in a slightly powerful voice, as, together with Cannon, he grabbed the pail and shaking Jessica's shoulders.
バトラさんの言う通りですな。この部屋にこれ以上好んで居続けることはありますまい。
Nanjo spoke while looking at the pale faces all around. Even though that horrible scene in the storehouse had felt like something not of this world, at least it was in a place far from here, a place we had been able to cut ourselves off and run away from, which had helped everyone to keep on going. However, this dining hall was different. It was in the mansion's main wing. And, as Jessica had said, it was supposed to be one of the more relaxing places within the mansion. It was the same place where all of the relatives had enjoyed lunch and dinner yesterday. The shock of seeing this place smeared with blood reminded us of that horrible spectacle in the storehouse, and forced us to accept that we really haven't been able to run away from the scene of that tragedy.
わしも同感や。この部屋には犯人の痕跡が残ってるかもわからんしな。素人のわしらがかき回すべきとちゃうで。はよ出るんや。はよはよ。
Hideyoshi also understood the meaning of what Battler had said and pushed everyone to hurry out of the dining hall. The way we were then, looking at the blood any longer would have been too harsh. Nobody went against his words. Everyone raised each other out of the dining hall, almost as though the last person in the room would be trapped in there, all alone. Once in the hallway, we lent a shoulder to Kumasawa, who was leaning against the wall, still trembling, and we all headed back to the parlor together. Then, Genji returned.
お、源氏さん、警察に連絡はつきましたか？
それが申し訳ございません。無線機の故障か、それ以外の理由によるものかわかりませんが。
なんや、警察に連絡がつかんのか。電話も無線もどっちもダメなんか。
申し訳ございません。月曜の朝に船が来ることになっていますので、その船の通信機を借りることができると思います。
この島には船はないんか。新島の警察署までちょっくら行ってくることはできんのか。
秀吉さん、この天気では無理だ。少なくとも台風が通り過ぎるまではどうにもなりません。
クラウス様のボートは今修理中で島にございません。ですので月曜の船を待つほかないかと。
What a set of extremely unfortunate circumstances.
そんなアホな話があるか。6人も死んだんやで。そして電話も無線も通じず、船もない。台風が過ぎて船が来るまで、つまり明日の朝までわしらは警察にも連絡できず、 この島におれっちゅうことなんか？
And I just realized this, but given how, we don't know the existence of that 19th person, although it was planted into their minds, I'm sure they are all going to start suspecting each other when the time comes. I don't think they'll be able to sleep in peace.
ってことはつまり、俺たちだけじゃなく、おじさんたちを殺した犯人も、この島から出られず、足止めってことだな。
そういうことになるね。みんなを殺した犯人は、まだこの島にいる。
親父たちを殺した奴は、この島から逃げ出せず、まだ潜んでやがるってことかよ。くそ見つけ出してやるぜ。警察になんか引き渡すもんか。私がこの手でやっつ先にしてやる。
Maria had finally realized that something was odd in the parlor. Or, rather than noticing something odd, it was probably better to say that she felt unhappy and neglected since everyone was getting so excited about something only she didn't know about.
おー、ジェシカお姉ちゃん、誰か死んじゃったの？
This is a bit... The way she spoke was completely calm. Just as though she was talking about characters in a TV drama, as though it didn't affect her at all. Jessica probably didn't like that. As though trying to say, "Can't you tell just by looking at me?" Overwhelmed with grief, she flared up against Maria.
死んじまったぜ。みんな私の親父もバトラーの父さんと母さんも幸田さんもシャノンも、そしてマリアの母さんも。
よすんだジェシカちゃん。悲しいのは君だけじゃない。
マリアさん、ショックだろうが聞いてください。あなたのお母さんがな、死んでしまいました。
ママが死んじゃった？
That's such an odd tone.
おー。
ああ。誰かに殺されちまった。悲しいだろうがよ。心をしっかり。
I don't think she's even sad.
何人死んじゃった？
6人だぜ。6人だ。くそあんな残酷なことしやがって。踊ってもんがあるだろうがよ。人間ならよ。誰だか知らねえが、犯人は人間じゃねえぜ。血の色が赤いわけがね
うーん。
Oh god. That was scary.
犯人は人間じゃない。鍵が選んだ。生贄なだけ。
おい、マリア、今、なんて言った？
Maria had just said something. But since the words were so remotely separated from the flow and context of the conversation, for a second, I couldn't understand them. As I was about to ask her to repeat it, I was shocked by the sudden sound of Aunt Natsuhi's loud voice coming from the entrance to the parlor. It looked like Aunt Natsuhi and Auntie Eva had returned from their trip to see grandfather.
無線でも連絡できない？こんな時に使えなくて、何のための防災無線ですか？
申し訳ございません。毎年、保守点検はさせているはずなのですが。
ほら、光をチカチカさせるみたいな船舶信号ってあるじゃない？そういうので向こうの島に連絡することはできないのかしら？
そのような設備はございません。申し訳ございません。
Just then, Kumasawa came pushing a serving cart loaded with breakfast. Since there was no way we would be able to eat in a dining hall, Hideyoshi had ordered her to bring it to the parlor.
なぜ朝食をこちらに？
ああ、夏日さん、それは後で話す。それよりエヴァ、お父さんはどうなんや？
ご一緒でないところを見ると、 このような事態になっても部屋から出ませんか？
いないわ。
Oh my.
部屋は空っぽだったのよ。
なんやて？
I'm getting chills.
こんな時にどこ行ったんや？
親方様が書斎を出られたというのですか？
そうです。私も驚いています。いつの間に部屋を出たのやら。あなたたちに心当たりはないのですか？
Natsuhi looked at Genji and Kennen as she said this. She probably thought that the servants permitted the one-winged eagle, who served directly under him, would know of a place he might go to. However, it seemed to be the other way around. Their faces made it clear that those who knew Kinzo best realized even more than everyone else how impossible it was for him to leave his room.
僕たちにも見当がつきません。
ご存知の通り、親方様はあの書斎の中に、お休みの場所からご不浄まで全てを設けさせました。親方様があの部屋をお出になることなど、よっぽどのことがない限り考えられません。
となると、なんや、そのよっぽどのことがあったって考えるのが自然だっちゅうことになるんか。
まだそうと決まったわけではありません。とにかく気まぐれな方ですから。現状をご存知なく、お一人で散歩をされている可能性もあります。仮にそうだとしたら、一刻も早く現状をお知らせして、ご指示を仰がねばなりません。
そうね。考えたくはないけど。お父様の身に何かあったのかもしれないしね。
そのような不吉なことは考えたくもありません。
No one had seen Kinzo since the 6 horrible corpses had been found. On top of that, the phones were broken, the radio wouldn't reach anyone, and there was no way to contact the police. It looked like the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come. But until then, no one could rely on anyone outside the island, nor could they escape the island. Everyone had lost their composure at the extremely sudden tragedy. A heavy silence and a sense of impatience. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. Some of them became irritated, while others merely held their heads in their hands. But not one of them could explain what was occurring on this island of Rokkenjima. After that, we sat in the parlor and wordlessly chewed through breakfast that Kumasawa-san had made. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one had any appetite. However, we realized that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken the tasteful Western vegetables, one that Goda-san had probably special ordered for the purpose of some extravagantly fancy dish, and cooked them in a Japanese style, making them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Goda-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then, I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I would be reminded of the way Goda-san had died, and then the inside of my mouth would be filled with a sour taste. For the time being, everyone pretended to eat, but there was no hope of anyone making any headway into the meal. Then, everyone was brought up to speed on the current situation. First off, that Uncle Kraus, my dad, Hirie-san, Auntie Rosa, Goda-san, and Shannon-chan had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as cruelly mutilated corpses. And that despite that, we were unable to use phones or radio and still couldn't contact the police. So until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, grandfather, who we had hoped might be able to show a little leadership in this kind of situation, had disappeared at some point. Goda-san hadn't made breakfast, so grandfather's stomach must have been empty. And if he had just been taking a casual walk, by now he should have been stomping back to whine about how hungry he was. And yet, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he had become caught up in the earlier crime. Aunt Natsuhi and Auntie Eva had said that, on their return trip from going to see Kinzo, they had called out to him on every floor looking for him, but were not able to find him. If you think about the timing of it all, it was probably best to think that he had been caught up in the crime. If the culprit had taken the trouble to move the bodies of Dad and the rest, who we figured had been killed in a dining hall, all the way to the storehouse, then maybe they had already killed grandfather, moved his body to some strange location, and we had simply not found it yet. No one actually said it, but this theory seemed extremely convincing.
私たちはお屋敷の戸締まりを確認してきます。お父様も念入りに探さなければなりません。子供たちはこの部屋を出ないように。エヴァさんと秀吉さんは申し訳ありませんが、ここで子供たちと一緒にいてください。南條先生もおね。
わかりました。ここでお待ちしています。
Aunt Natsuhi led the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Kennen-kun, out of the parlor. All that was left was Auntie Eva, Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the four of us children, who formed a total of 7 people.
みんなで仲良くテレビでも見て待ってよな。しかし日曜日の午前中はろくな番組やっとらへんな。
Uncle Hideyoshi tried to stir up this gloomy atmosphere, acting cheerfully.
ろくな番組見る見る。
お、そうか。マリアちゃんはテレビ見るか。じゃ、おじさんと一緒に見ような。
Maria was the only one who played along. I don't think she's playing along at this point. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was 9 really this young an age? No one else was feeling the slightest bit like joining in, and they each sank into their sofas and let their minds go blank.
兄貴、聞いていいか？
なんだい？
さっき倉庫で兄貴はシャノンちゃんの指輪の話をしたよな。あれ送ったのは兄貴か？
George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response.
よせよバトラー、少しは察しろよ。
だな、悪いことを聞いたぜ。
そうさ、僕だよ。彼女に昨べ求婚したんだ。その時指輪を渡した。明日になったらそれを好きな指にはめて返事としてくれって。気ざったらしいことを言ってね。
And that ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon Chan's left hand.
私さ、数年前からシャドンに相談を受けてたぜ。ジョージ兄さんのことでさ。
なんて言ってたのかな。
シャノンは嘘をつくのが下手だったからよ。ジョージ兄さんのことを言ってるのはすぐにバレバレでさ。自分は使用人の身分だけど親しくしてもいいのだろうかとか、男の人の好きそうなものは何かとか、どういう服を着たら喜ぶかとか、そんなことをいろいろとさ。なんつうのか、そのまあ焼けたぜ。
それが婚約指輪を渡されて、そこでおしまいかよ。
価値観は人それぞれだけどよ、男から求婚されるってのはある意味人生の到達点なんだと思うんだよ。だからきっと昨夜のシャノンは心の底から、いや生まれてから今までの中で
George Aniki, without raising his head, sighed deeply. Or maybe tears had risen to his eyes.
シャノンは昨べゲストハウスの当番だったらしいんだ。でもシャノンは僕と一緒にゲストハウスに帰るのを恥ずかしがってお屋敷に行ってしまった。
シャノンの気持ちを察しろよ。婚約指輪をもらえばどんなに予告されてたって普通は舞い上がっちまって頭は真っ白になっちまうぜ。気恥ずかしくて仕方なかったんだろうよ。
それでシャノンは当番でないはずのお屋敷へ行き、事件に巻き込まれてしまった。僕があの日あの場所で指輪なんか渡さなければシャノンはサヨは事件に巻き込まれなかったんだ。
兄貴、それだけは違うぜ。断じて違う。だからそれ以上泣くんじゃねえ。
バトラー君、そっとしてあげなさい。
After those words from Auntie Eva, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually hurt him. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and quietly put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki's and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had been discussing that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Auntie Eva and sat down on the opposite sofa.
バトラー君は強いわね。もうだいぶしっかりしているように見えるわよ。
まあほら、愛の深さが傷の深さじゃないっすか。俺は別にあんなクソ親父同志の方が知ったことじゃないし、キリエさんは気の毒ですが、まあ本当の親ってわけじゃないですしね。
I'm sure this is not how he actually feels.
あら、という割にはさっきすっごく大泣きしてたわよ。
まあ育ての親に対する恩はあのくらい泣けば OK かと思いまして。
そのあたりの切り替えの速さやドライなあたりは本当にルドルフ譲りね。あの子は昔から激しく喜んだり悲しんだり怒ったりしたけれど、すぐにケロリと平静を取り戻したわ。
そんなことはないっすよ。俺だってまだまだ心のショックから立ち直れちゃいません。ただ俺がみんなと違うのは、それによってどういう感情が生み出されるかってことだと思います。
どういうこと？
I was acting much calmer than George, Aniki, and Jessica were. That wasn't because my sadness was less intense and I had already sprung back to normal. It was because my sadness had been gradually replaced by a different emotion.
悲しいっていうよりは腹立たしいって気持ちなんすよ。どこのドイツがこんなことをしやがったのか。横っ面に一発お見舞いしてやらないことには。
That was what I really wanted to do. It was like I couldn't allow myself to just sit here, overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees.
親父たちが殺されて以降、この島は 台風に包まれたままです。つまりこれだけの上等を決めてくれやがった野郎はまだこの島の中にいるってことです。
そういうことになるわね。今も暗い森のどこかに身を潜めているのかしら。
I felt like I had a very similar conversation to Kirie with Kirie-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person who claimed to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we had talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists.
エヴァおばさん、この殺人、昨夜のベアトリーチェの手紙と何か関連があるんでしょうかね。
ああ、例の？さあ、どうかしらね。あの手紙はお父様が遺産問題に絡みたくて出した怪文書という見方で兄弟は一致したんだけれども、それと今朝の事件に関係があるかは今の段階では分かりかねるわね。
あの手紙、本当にベアトリーチェなんて魔女がマリアに渡したんすかね。
まさか。全部お父様の仕組んだ茶番でしょ。シャノンちゃんあたりに肖像画のドレスを着させてマリアちゃんを騙したんでしょ。お父様らしい手の込みすぎたいたずらだと思うけど。
昨夜キリエさんとベアトリーチェは実在するんだろうかって話をしたんですけど、キリエさんも俺たち18人の中にベアトリーチェがいるだろうと言ってましたね。
そんなの当然じゃない。この島には私たちしかいないのよ。
I still think that Beatrice, or at least someone other than the 18 of them, could possibly be out there.
なら私たちの中の誰かがベアトリーチェを語ったに決まってるじゃない。
この島には俺たち以外はいないですか。
当然でしょ。私たち以外の誰がここにいるっていうの？この島には私たちしかいない。18人しかいない。ならベアトリーチェを語るのも18人の中の誰かしかいないじゃない。
Kirie-san had denied that there was a 19th person by flipping over the chessboard. Even though Auntie Eva hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion at least was the same. Except, if that is the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, we were able to dismiss the matter as just someone's prank. However, if we deny the existence of a 19th person at this point, matters are not so jovial. In other words,
19人目がいないなら親父たちを殺した犯人も18人の中にいるってことになっちまうじゃないですか。つまり今この屋敷にいる誰かが殺したってことになる。
Auntie Eva smiled meaningfully. It looked like Auntie thought that this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning.
犯人は倉庫の中に6人の遺体を運び込んだわ。でもよく倉庫の中に運び込めたわよね。あのシャッターは常に閉められていて施錠されていたそうよ。つまり倉庫内に運び込むにはシャッターの施錠を開ける必要があった。わかる？
たまたまその日シャッターが開けっぱなしになってた可能性は？
使用人たちは常に閉めていると言ってたわ。つまり鍵を使用人室から持ち出さなくては倉庫は絶対に開けられない。
鍵は使用人室の一つしかないんすかね。
源氏さんはそうだと言ってるわ。ということは犯人はそのたった一つの倉庫の鍵のありかを知っていて持ち出した。さっきカノン君が使用人室に鍵を戻すところを見たわ。壁にびっしりと鍵がかけられていて、とても素人にはどこに何がかけてあるのかわからなかった。犯人はその中から倉庫の鍵を見事選び出したの。しかも札も何もついていない鍵を手にしてバラ庭園裏にある倉庫の鍵だと理解した。ついでに言うと倉庫の場所すら理解していた。もっとはっきり断言するわ。犯人は 使用人室の内部にも熟知している。
Her argument was extremely plain and clear. If the bodies had been thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, no explanation would have been necessary. However, the one key to the storehouse was in the servant room, and stored with a large group of other keys, such that a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant that the culprit was someone who was used to going in and out of this servant room and knew very well where the key was. The family didn't normally go into the servant room, which meant that...
ってことは、使用人の誰かが犯人。
悪いけど、それ以上はおばさんも言えないわよ。でも、一つだけ教えられることがあるわ。
なんすか？
犯人たちは複数で、そして十分な武装をしていたと考えられるわ。だってそうでしょ？
I don't.
食堂にいた兄さんたち4人を一度に襲って殺し、合計6人分の遺体をようようとバラ庭園の向こうの倉庫まで運んで、悪趣味な化粧と落書きを施している。
メイクアップ？
これだけのことを単独犯で行えるはずもないでしょう。
It was impossible. It might not have been if a single person spent enough time on it, but that would have taken ages. It was probably best to think that a significant number of people had been part of it. That's what I'm leaning to as well.
ひゅー。ってことは、エヴァおばさんは使用人の人たちがみんなグルだろうって言ってんすか？
静かになさいな。憶測で言っちゃ悪いわよ。それにもし本当にそうだったらどうするつもり？彼らは私たちを生かして返さないでしょうね。しかも兄さんたち4人をやすやすと殺した相手なのよ。今この部屋に残っていてまともに戦えそうな人間はうちの家族の3人にせいぜいバトラ君で4人ってところ。状況は昨晩と何も変わらない。つまり犯人にとって残る私たちを皆殺しにするなんて簡単なことなのよ。
I had been playing detective with Auntie Eva out of a desire to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest before the police did. If I could manage to skillfully penetrate the culprit's identity, I wanted to stick the evidence in their face. I had gotten it into my head that if I did that, the culprit would give up and surrender, just like in one of those detective movies. However, the culprit only surrenders there because they are in a situation where resisting would be futile. The culprits behind these incidents on the island were far from helpless, and on top of that, this island was like a giant locked room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had the full day until tomorrow to kill, scheme, and cover up their handiwork. In short, we weren't in a kind of safe atmosphere where we could entertain ourselves by playing detective. On the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits and cause them to repeat another mass murder.
あくまでも可能性の問題よ。でも私は使用人の人たちをまだ信用できないわね。それに私は使用人だけを疑ってるわけじゃないわ。さらに黒幕がいるかもしれないと思ってるわ。
黒幕？どうしてですか？
勘よ。使用人は書いて字のごとし、誰かに使用されて手足となる存在よ。
So Kinzo, huh?
殺されたのは後宮家の親族ばかり。なら、その結果で利害が発生する人間が関わるのは当然。
That was also plain and clear. The Ushiro-miya family were currently right in the middle of discussing how to distribute the inheritance if grandfather died. If this followed the formulaic plot used to death by many classic mystery novels, it would definitely be a crime by someone with ties to the Ushiro-miya family who was entangled in the inheritance problem. auntie had probably also read a few books in that genre. The theory did have a few one-sided conclusions to it, but it was a run-of-the-mill idea that anyone would surely hit upon. I think anyone would have suspected the servants even if their logic was different. Especially talk revolving around the key to the shutter. That was enough to make it easy to suspect strongly that one of the servants was involved in the case.
だからなぜか気に入らねえんすよね。
気に入らないって何の話？
あ、いやいや、こっちの話っす。
I dodged the question by joking, but I couldn't wipe out the sense of unease I felt inside me. Because the reasoning we had arrived at was altogether too simple. Reasoning that anyone could arrive at. And I just couldn't accept that. If I tried flipping over the chessboard like I had learned from Kirie-san, that was exactly why it was impossible for the servants to be the culprits. If the servants really had been the culprits, they wouldn't have hidden the bodies in a place that was tied to themselves. Certainly not the Rose Garden storehouse of all places, whose key they controlled themselves. The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. That would create a danger for exposure. If we were to assume that they were the culprits, they had no reason to carry the bodies into the storehouse. Did they expect us to think that, and so put them in the storehouse deliberately? No, that definitely didn't make sense. When the police come and inspect the site, all kinds of things will probably become clear. No matter how deeply careful the culprits were in carrying out the murder, some kind of traces will definitely be found. So, in summary, they have everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it this way, and look at the game from the culprit side, it feels like there's no point in advertising the location of the corpses. If the bodies were found, a report would be sent to the police. The remaining people would become more cautious. They could start looking for who was responsible. Anyway, none of these things would make the culprits feel any more comfortable. Just like the words of the main character's mother in a novel I read recently called Higurashi no Naku Koroni. This is such a reference. A mystery story has 4 parts: introduction, development, turn, and conclusion. And so, to commit the perfect crime, it is essential to eliminate the introduction. Right now, no one knew where grandfather was. We didn't know whether he had already become a victim or if he was one of the culprits. But this state of confusion had to be beneficial to whoever did this. This is a creepy symbol. By blatantly advertising the bodies to us and declaring, hey, there's a murder case going on, the culprit had absolutely nothing to gain. Right. That was where we could flip over the chessboard. So this blatant advertisement of the bodies was itself the culprit's goal. So, it may well be that, to the culprit, having the 6 corpses be present there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted to display these murders. To who? To us. It was a message. The culprit was trying to shove something in our faces. I didn't know what that could be. At the current time, none of us could grasp anything from this vulgar mass murder except malice. Malice towards everyone, perhaps. Each one of the survivors had some kind of connection to one of the 6 who had been killed. Uncle Krause's death brought sorrow to Jessica's family. The deaths of Dad and Kirie-san brought sorrow to me, while Auntie Rosa's death brought sorrow to Maria. Oda-san's death probably dealt a shock to his fellow servants, and Shannon-chan's death brought grief to George Aniki, who had proposed to her, and to Kanen-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. Everyone now on this island had received an equal amount of sadness, except Eva and Hideyoshi. Auntie Eva had claimed that the servants were definitely in cahoots. But then, how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Shannon-chan? Right. And by this argument, the grief caused by the six hit everyone but Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi. It was very possible to doubt Auntie Eva herself, who was acting like she was outside the net of suspicion and who might have been trying to point that suspicion at the servants. In the first place, she managed to avoid suspicion and place it on the servants with that argument about the key to the shutter. But if you looked at it from a perspective of motive, about who would gain something from the murders, Auntie Eva's name floated to the top of that list.
Battler 君が何を考えてるか、おばさんわかるわよ。
わ？嫌だな。内緒にしててくださいよ。あんなことやこんなことで頭をいっぱいにしてたなんて。
私がこの殺人で一番得をする。どうせ疑われるだろうから、先に自己申告しておくわ。
I had tried to dodge the conversation by joking around, but it looked like it hadn't worked.
遺産は兄弟の数で分割する。でも今や4兄弟は私一人。後ろ宮家の全財産は全て私のものになるの。
秀吉おじさんが聞いたら、予算か言えばシャレにならんっていうところっすね。
ごめんね。どう取り繕ったってどうせ疑われるだろうからふざけただけよ。だからこの殺人は私の立場から見れば私を疑わせるためのものではないかと思ってるの。困ったことに昨べのアリバイは弱いわ。
聞かせてもらってもいいっすか？昨べのことを。
バトラ君たちも知っている通り、兄弟が遺産をどう食いちぎり合うかという話し合いは深夜まで続いたわ。でも何時まで続いたかは知らない。私と主人は朝が早かったからね。もう眠くて24時を過ぎたあたりで抜けさせてもらったの。そしてゲストハウスに戻って休んだわ。
それを秀吉おじさん以外の誰かに証明できるっすか？いやいや、別にエヴァおばさんを疑ってるわけじゃないっすよ。
あら、どうだか。証明になるかわからないけれど、ゲストハウスに戻ってきた時、源氏さんに出迎えを受けてタオルはいるかと聞かれたわ。
But this Genji-san is also part of the suspicious servants, right?
だから私たちがゲストハウスに戻ってきた時間は24時過ぎだと証明してくれると思うわよ。もっとも、私の仮説通り、使用人たちもグルなのだとしたら、こんなのアリバイにならないけどね。
確かにそうっすね。ってことは、俺、今、真犯人と推理ごっこをしてるってことになるんすか？
でも私の名誉のために言わせてもらうけど、遺産目当てだったならこんな変な殺人はしないわよ。だって遺産相続権を喪失させるだけならどんな死に方だって構わない。むしろ自己死に見せかけた方がスマートでしょ。使用人たちを抱き込んで周到に計画していたならなおさらそうするでしょうよ。
確かにそうっすね。営利で人を殺すならそれは常に殺人に見せるべきではない。
そういうことよ。だからおばさんは今からとてもブルーな気持ちなわけ。警察には黒幕扱いされて散々調べられるでしょうね。やだやだ。
Auntie Eva shrugged with a bitter smile. Just like it was easy to think of the servants as suspicious, it was also very easy to think of Auntie Eva as suspicious. So if we flip over the chessboard, did that mean it was impossible for the culprit to be the easily doubtable Auntie Eva? However, if that logic could pass so easily, then motive wouldn't count for anything. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive should be a big clue towards knowing the culprit. That is why murderers throughout history have tried to ensure their motive will not be found out by skillfully complicating the incidents. I don't know. Every time I try to flip over the chessboard, it keeps flipping from front to back and back to front. Were my thoughts closing in on the truth? Or... Auntie Eva didn't want to talk any more than that, so I headed to the window, folding my arms so that I could cool my head a little. As I looked over the parlor, I saw George, Aniki, and the others gathered, talking. It looked like they were talking about the magic circle that had been painted onto the shutter. As Uncle Hideyoshi thought back to that time, he started drawing the shape in the margins of Maria's notebook. Yes, Maria is second only to grandfather in the knowledge of the occult, so she might understand what it meant.
多分こんな感じだったと思うで。十字架をアレンジしたみたいなマークが書かれとったんや。そしてこんな感じで外周の円を取り囲むように妙な文字がびっしり書き込まれていて、十字架の上下左右の辺とその四隅にも何か書かれていたんや。アルファベットとかそういうのとちゃうで。あれはよく言う古代文字とかいうやつや。
あと、円周部の頂点に小さなマークがありましたな。小さな丸を5つ十字状に並べ、それぞれを直線で結んだようなマークでした。
ああ、確かにそんなのも書いてあったで。図形的には間違いなくこれや。細かい文字はわからんが、配列はほぼ同じや。
Everyone was staring down at the shape, so I stared down at it too. From what I had heard, this had been painted on the shutter to the storehouse with some material that looked like blood. I see. This sure is unsettling.
こんなわけのわかんねえもんを書きたがるのはじいさまだけだろ。まったく、どこに行っちまったんだ。とっ捕まえて意味を聞き出してやりたいぜ。
Jessica's voice contained impatience and anger. She hadn't gone so far as to say that grandfather was the culprit, though she thought that grandfather definitely knew about the culprit's identity. Certainly, if we asked around for the link that bound the Ushiromiya family and the occult together, 10 out of 10 people would name grandfather. And, to a person who knew nothing of the occult, this strange mark would have no meaning. Which meant that this might have been something addressed to grandfather. That's right. The reason to advertise the crime is to show it off to the survivors. In that case, where had grandfather, as the essential recipient of this message, disappeared off to?
こんな図形に何か心当たりはあるかい？
Maria looked at the shape with a serious face. Maybe she was enthusiastic since this was her area of expertise. However, her appearance was that of someone separated from the events at hand, as though that this thing hadn't been drawn on the shutter closed around her mother's corpse.
僕の第一印象ではどこか外国の十字章に似たデザインだなって思ったかな。
ああ、確かにこんなデザインや。ということはどこぞの国と何か関係があるんか？
その国の十字章はもともと聖地巡礼者を守るための騎士修道士たちの紋章だったそうですな。
Oh, I didn't know that.
つまり、この魔法陣には宗教的な意味があるってことかよ。ますますにちんぷんかんぷんだぜ。
When I looked over at all of them, preparing to jump into the discussion, something shocked me. Oh goodness. Maria was grinning, an eerie expression on her face that defied description. A sort of grin like she was making fun of everyone's ignorance, If Maria was not already suspicious, she is definitely suspicious now. It was an expression that I wouldn't ever believe Maria to be capable of making. Oh goodness me. And then she laughed. An eerie, jarring laugh. Even though I was looking at it right in front of my eyes, I really didn't want to accept it as real. Oh goodness, I'm so scared.
全然違うよみんな。
No, I hate this so much.
こんなの見てわかんないかな。
While everyone was scared out of their wits, Maria alone kept on cackling happily. After a while, that laugh suddenly and abruptly cut off. But her expression was still like someone completely different from Maria.
これは太陽の7の魔法陣だよ。
Guys, please, I hope there's no more jump scares, but I have a feeling this game has a lot.
書かれてる文字はヘブライ語。貸して。
Maria stole the writing materials from the stunned Hideyoshi's hand. She then started drawing another magic circle, effortlessly, right next to the one that Hideyoshi had drawn.
ね、
She's so creepy now.
こんな図形だったんじゃないかな。
そんな図形だった。
マリア、すごいな。さすが詳しいぜ。
Jessica tried to smooth things over by praising Maria. Maybe she wanted to make sure that this was still the Maria who everyone knew so well. But Maria didn't give her any particular response. Maria started fluently writing unfamiliar characters in the corners of the shape. At this sight, the eyes of Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo instantly began to widen.
天地と左右に書かれているのは風化水道を司る天使たちの名。カサン、アレル、タリアハド、そしてフォルラク。そして斜め四方には4代の統治者たちの名。アリエル、セラフ、タルシス、ケルブ。合ってる？
Even if you are unable to correctly write what you have seen, if you are once again shown something identical, it isn't difficult to state that the two are the same. Asked by Maria whether they matched, Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo nodded over and over again.
間違いない。そうや。確かにこんな文字が書かれとった。なんでこんなん書けるんや。
あと、演習部にも文字が書かれておりましたな。
わかってるよ。こうでしょ。
Maria began jotting down Hebrew all around the circumference.
旧約聖書の詩編第116編の16節と17節だよ。聖書くらい読んでなきゃ。
Acting as though knowing this was only common sense, Maria laughed. For a while, everyone, including me, was at a loss for words. After some moments, George Aniki returned to his senses and slowly managed to speak.
すごいね。驚いたよ。それで、この魔法陣にはどんな意味があるんだい？
太陽の力を借りる魔法陣だよ。黄金で描き、護符にして身につけたる者はいかなる牢獄であろうとも、束縛から逃れ、自由を得られる力を授けられる。
束縛から逃れ、自由を得られる。意味深だぜ。
この束縛という意味は何も肉体的なものだけを指さないと解釈されている。だから縛られて牢屋にいる人ばかりに意味があるわけじゃないよ。しがらみや逃れぬ運命など精神的な束縛からの解放も意味してるんだよ。
しがらみや逃れ得ぬ運命か。これまた意味深だな。
Yeah, I'm also trying to process it right now.
しかしさっぱりわからん。それとあの6人の遺体とどんな関係があるっちゅうんや。
I was gonna save it for the end, but I'm just gonna say it here. Right now, at least, it feels like Maria is trying to revive the Golden Witch by sacrificing the 6 people. I'm gonna call Maria out right now. I think she's one of the culprits. But we'll see.
束縛からの解放どころか、殺された上に倉庫に閉じ込められてたんやで。
別にその6人のために魔法陣が描かれてるわけじゃないね。魔法陣のために6人はそこにいるんでしょう。お気の毒だよ。
どういう意味だい？魔法陣のために6人がいるってのは一体。
Maria lifted up her index finger and waggled it as if she was making fun of us.
それは演習部に書いてるよ。読めないかな？詩編第116編16節と17節。読んであげるよ。主は私の枷を解かれました。私はあなたに感謝の生贄を捧げ、主の皆を呼ぶでしょう。ね。
ねって何を言ってるのかさっぱりだぜ。
Me too.
生贄だってのか。
If the part that Maria had just read aloud was a vital part of the magic circle, then it was saying that the benefit of this magic circle required sacrifices to be offered in exchange. So inside the storehouse, where the magic circle had been drawn, the sacrifices had been offered. It looked like everyone else had slowly arrived at the same conclusion. Some were shocked, some others spat out they're insane as they punched their knees. This was starting to become a seriously disturbing story, and we couldn't accept it nor understand it. I don't care what kind of magic circles or curses other people believe in. That's their right, and I won't pick a fight with them. But did they really kill Dad and the rest as sacrifices for some bullshit like that? I just couldn't stand that feeling. I'd rather still be disgusted over all that talk about inheritance. As I started getting pissed off with a feeling between anger and sadness, I broke from the circle everyone was in and returned once again to the window. Something had gone insane since yesterday. That letter from the witch Beatrice that Maria had read aloud at last night's dinner. I feel like ever since that point, this whole mansion and this whole island have begun to be drawn into some kind of peculiar world. That's right. When I think back on it, that letter was an invitation from the witch. The ruler of the nighttime island had invited us inhabitants of the day into another world. With the phone and the radio interrupted, and the island shut off by the typhoon, you could now call it another world cut off from the real one. Yes, on this island right now, it is perfectly normal for witches to send letters and for sacrifices to be offered to magic circles. So, what will happen next? Will some weird people wearing goat masks start doing the Bond Festival dance or something? It's no good. It's no good. I don't get it. The inside of my head's all screwed up, and I don't even know what to think. Anger, sadness, the opposing emotions all swirled up together, and they started to suck me in. Unable to resist, I could do nothing but cover my eyes with my hands and then trust my mind and body to the spiral swallowing me. I'm prepared for any jump scare right now. As I started losing heart, I began to recall a distant memory. It was from a time when I was very young. I had unfortunately seen a scary occult movie on TV, and for a while, I hadn't even been able to go to the bathroom by myself. The old bastard had given an exaggerated laugh and said this.
なあ、バトラ。どうして悪魔だのオカルトだのってのをわざわざこうして映画にすると思う？ねえからだよ。そんな滑稽なもんは地球のどこにもねえのさ。ねえからわざわざ見たくて作るんだよ。
It feels a bit like a self-reference to Umineko itself.
だから俺はオカルト映画なんて ちゃんちゃらおかしくて笑っちまうってんだ。俺に言わせりゃ、悪魔やら妖怪やらより、今年度の収支報告や機嫌を悪くした女房の方が1億倍も怖えってもんだぜ。さらに言うぜ。俺に言わせりゃな、怖がるってのは、心と生活にゆとりのある連中の娯楽的感情なのさ。暇でしょうがないから。連中は変わった感情で心を遊ばせたくて、悪魔だの、オカルトだのって文化を作り出したんだよ。
Seriously, why have I been acting so damn thick-headed? I was totally taken in. To hell with that shit. This is the human world. As if I give a crap about witches, demons, magic circles, and sacrifices. The human who killed my dad and everyone else is still on this island. That's all there is, right? Next to start speaking to my heart was Kirie-san.
チェスや将棋ってね、終盤の終盤、詰めの最後の段階に入れば入るほど最善手は限られてくるのよ。だから自分が追い詰めている、あるいは追い詰められているというその時、両者の手は限りなく読みやすくなるのよ。つまり完全に追い詰められて打つ手なしって思ったその時こそ最も読みやすい瞬間なのよ。でも守勢に立った人間はどうしても考えが固くなって相手の手を読むことにまで考えが至らない。そういう時はね、チェス盤をひっくり返すの。
With all of my strength, I slapped my face with both my hands. Now my eyes were truly open. You don't understand anything, and you're completely cornered just like I am now. Isn't that the perfect time to flip over the chessboard? With us put on the defensive, we couldn't even guess at the culprit's scheme. If you flipped it over and looked at it the other way, just how far could you see? First off, at the time the murders were committed by the culprit, they knew that the island was cut off by the typhoon. So, they should have understood that even if they carried out the murders, they wouldn't be able to get away until the next morning. In short, the culprit had begun without securing a way to escape. Furthermore, the bastard had even tossed the corpses in the storehouse, while doing the courtesy of telling us they are here with that weird graffiti. In other words, since we probably would find the corpses sooner or later, they wanted to show us them. If we had all been dim and hadn't noticed the storage shed, perhaps the culprit's goal would not have been achieved. If you think about it this way, that murdering maniac, since this morning he must have been watching our every move with bated breath. That brings me to Kinzo, who was staring out the window when Natsuhi went to visit him, right? After all, if we hadn't been so kind as to discover what was on the storehouse, all of that hard work and preparation that they had done last night would have just gone poof. What did that culprit want to make us feel by showing us the corpses in the storehouse? All 6 of the bodies had their faces noticeably destroyed. A grudge? A warning? The defacement of the bodies had occurred after death. So it hadn't been the means by which the culprit had murdered. It didn't mean anything to those who had been killed. It had meaning to those who discovered it. Right. The culprit wanted to show them to us. Look how brutally I killed them. Huh. After thinking this way, I really want to tell that asshole to stop taking me so lightly. Who would dance to that tune if I'm told, please be scared? I'm not just gonna say, really? Sure thing. When someone tells the great Eva Battler, entrance this way, I'm the kind of guy who'll start wanting to sneak in through the window. The next thing that had me concerned was the attempt at a magic circle on the shutter. It was a genuine magic circle declared authentic by even Maria, who had demonstrated that her knowledge of the occult rivaled grandfather's. They must have drawn that thing in pitch black darkness while holding an umbrella in one hand. and it must have taken them a lot of time. That's a formidable amount of hard work and attention to detail. What purpose would have been worth all of that effort? If something related to the occult happened in the mansion, most likely we would all automatically suspect the involvement of grandfather. Did they want to make us think grandfather was involved? But if that was all they wanted, they could have just drawn any old scribble that looked like a magic circle. It wasn't like any of us amateurs could tell the difference between genuine and fake. However, the magic circle was genuine, and furthermore, it had even been written in Hebrew. So this magic circle had a message that could only be understood by someone with knowledge of the occult. Messages are a form of communication. You send them and hope for a reaction from the other party. Reaction? For some reason, we couldn't find grandfather now. I don't know how grandfather could have managed to see the magic circle on a shutter. But had he chosen to hide himself in reaction to that sign? No. Was it a trap to make us suspect grandfather's involvement? You could read it either way. Damn, that's annoying. What kind of reaction was the culprit hoping to get out of us by showing this imitation of the occult? Somehow, that felt like the culprit's weak point. A section of Beatrice's letter that Maria had read aloud during the last night's dinner sprang back into my mind. The part that said, "I ask that you enjoy your battle of wits." Sounds like fun. This is a battle of wits between us and the witch. Which will be first, us being swallowed up by your occult games, or me revealing you for who you are? There's a whole day until the typhoon passes. Why not enjoy ourselves? That's only if no one gets murdered next. I finally noticed that the inside of the parlor had gone quiet again. Everyone had sunk into their favorite sofas, some deep in thought, some irritated, some depressed. Maria was once again enjoying the television as if she had never left it. It looked like she found the commercials more fun than the boring program, and she happily yelled, "Ooh," and giggled. I stared at each person's appearance in turn. If there isn't a 19th person, the culprit must be in this room. My heart is beating so hard. Right now, Aunt Natsuhi was searching the mansion with the servants, though, wasn't she? Then it shouldn't be in this room. In this mansion is what we should say. After all, there was also the possibility that Aunt Natsuhi was behind this, and we still couldn't deny that one of the servants could be the killer. Anyone could be the bad guy. Still, Aunt Natsuhi and the rest sure are slow. Of course, it's not a small mansion, but isn't this taking a little too long just to walk around checking the windows and doors? Just as I thought that, Aunt Natsuhi and the rest returned. Not one of them was missing. But our relief was short-lived. Everyone looked at Aunt Natsuhi, shocked. What's happening? The talk I had with Auntie Eva started to creep back into my mind. The possibility that the culprits had enough in numbers, or weapons to kill all of those 6 at once. Oh my god! Why does she have a gun?
万が一に備えて持ってきたものです。
Oh, okay. Because that thing in Aunt Natsuhi's hand was a rifle. At a glance, its silhouette looked a lot like a hunting gun. But it was unusually short and kinda looked like a kid-sized gun. However, it had a thickness to it which revealed that this was definitely not some kid's toy.
それは金蔵さんの銃ですな。
ご存知でしたか？そうです。お父様の古いコレクションの中にあったことを思い出し、 探し出してきました。
ひゅー、すっげえ。夏日おばさん、それ本物なんすか？
ええ、本物です。実弾を発砲できますよ。昔お父様は野鳥を追い払うのに使ったりしていました。
Are he allowed guns in Japan?
あら懐かしい。どこから出てきたんやら。私がいくら触らせてって言っても指一本触れさせてくれなかったやつよ。
へえ、じい様こんなの持ってたんですか？知らなかったですよ。
お父様は昔西部劇にどっぷり使ってたことがあってね。あの世代はこういうライフル銃が大好きなのよ。
結構年季の入った銃のようですね。でもこんな短い仕様のは初めて見ました。
ああ、思い出したわ、その銃。懐かしいな。昔好きやった映画のガンマンが派手にぶっ放しとったやつだわ。お父さんも渋いな。
親方様がだいぶ昔に。ご覧の通り実銃ですので、どうかこの件はご内密にお願いいたします。
手に入れられたばかりの頃は大層気に入られておりまして、撃つより薬莢を出す動作が面白いらしくて、裏の森でいろいろとかっこつけて遊んでおられたもんですよ。
しかし物騒ね。そんなものまで持ち出しちゃうのかしら。
万が一に備えてです。賊はおそらく一人ではないでしょう。しかも主人たちを6人も殺した恐ろしい相手です。私には主人に代わって皆さんを明日まで守る義務がありますので。
As Natsuhi-san said this, she slumped down into one of the sofas and took a deep breath. As well as checking the doors and windows, she had also been trying to find grandfather. Since grandfather was not with her, apparently his whereabouts were still unknown.
屋敷内の戸締まりは厳重に確認してきました。ですが万が一ということもあります。みんななるべくここに一緒にいた方がいいでしょう。
そうね。ここに全員が集まって相互監視をしている方が安心だわ。
それはどういう意味ですか、エヴァさん。
別に夏日姉さんの意見に賛成しただけよ。
There was a dangerous atmosphere between the two of them. If you thought about who stood to gain the most from this inheritance problem standpoint, Auntie Eva was the most obvious answer. However, there was no proof that Aunt Natsuhi was innocent. No, if you view Beatrice's letter as grandfather's elaborate prank, and think of this incident as just an extension of that, there was more than enough evidence to doubt even grandfather. Aunt Natsuhi thought that the criminal was on the outside, but Auntie Eva thought that the criminal was on the inside. In short, it was a question of whether or not a 19th person exists. It was a doubt that had been repeated endlessly since last night's dinner, with a letter from the witch who called herself Beatrice. So was the culprit among us, or not? And did the witch Beatrice exist or not? If you assumed that something as stupid as a witch couldn't exist, it was the same as saying that one of the relatives here who shared a common bloodline was the culprit. If you didn't like that, it would be much more comfortable to simply accept the fairy tale about the witch. Did a witch do it? Draw that weird magic circle and sacrifice those people? If I could only accept that rubbish, I would be able to completely trust everyone in this room. However, damn common sense got in the way. It kept repeating that witches don't exist. In that case, the culprit was among us. In the middle of the seemingly endless rain, none of us could break our silence. I'm really terrified of dark screens now. 1 o'clock. A cult. Alright guys, this was a long one, but I'm gonna end here for today. And this episode was really a lot to take in because, well, Maria's jump scare. She started speaking like a totally different person and was mocking everyone. And she wasn't even alarmed by death. In fact, she seemed to have perfectly accepted it. Let me bring up the character menu. Oh, it updated with Kinzo missing, right? Ushiromiya Kinzo disappeared from his study unnoticed. Kinzo's study has everything from a bed to a toilet to a bathtub, so it is extremely rare for him to go outside. However, he does sometimes go out for a walk on a whim without telling anybody, which on several occasions have led to a huge uproar throughout the house. He usually comes back as soon as he gets hungry. Usually. I want to see whether this have updated for anyone. Yep, doesn't seem like it. Maria is the main star of this episode because of that really creepy face that she made. But also, I think it's clear that she has always been interested in occult since the very beginning. I remember there was a scene on a boat where they were talking about Maria's, obsession with the supernatural. Wasn't she the one who pointed out that a shrine was missing? Oh, I gotta remember what shrine that was. It might be important. And also, why I thought Maria could possibly be one of the culprits was mainly because of this line under Rosa's character. I'll be seeing her again, so I'm not lonely. It's just such a Maria thing to say. And this might be a bit far-fetched, but let's say we are gonna follow the epitaph, and there's this line, right, which says, tear apart the two who are close. And if we think about this from like a romantic standpoint, then it's obvious that it has to be Auntie Eva and Hideyoshi, even though there's also Shannon and George. But if we think of either Maria or Kinzo as the mastermind, okay, if we think of Maria as the mastermind, then I feel like she may not have realized that George and Shannon were, very close. And so she decided to leave Eva and Hideyoshi as the second sacrifices. That was my line of thought after I started suspecting Maria. But yeah, I think this episode brought up a lot of good points on who could possibly be the culprits, but I can't help but feel that everything discussed so far has been purely from a logical standpoint, and I think there's definitely more going on to it than just logic itself. And that's why I don't think Eva is the culprit, and Natsuhi is still kind of in that gray zone because she is extremely loyal to the Ushiromiya family, right? If Kinzo ordered her, if she believes that what she does is for the best of the family, then she might go ahead and kill. But it's a very gray zone with Natsuhi still. You remember that scene with Cannon and the wheelbarrow? Because I remember, and it keeps popping up in my head as we played this episode. I think he's not strong enough, right, to be able to carry bodies with him, even in a wheelbarrow or anything like that. And that's why I don't think Cannon is at least directly involved. So far, anyway, there could be more information that comes our way that will change things around. But definitely, today's episode brought Maria into the spotlight, and I am extremely scared of this little 9-year-old girl. I don't think I have anything else to add today. The next episode will probably be more dramatic than the last. It keeps getting worse and worse. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!